For some reason, I I went to the second page, covering chapters 47 through 57, um, and which has been an absolute delight. This is the third time I've read this novel, and I found this exercise, just as the discussion, as I was saying to Don before we started, hearing people's comments just um, really makes it even richer. So I'm going to be highlighting by the chapter, and each chapter will be enriched by Trollope's pen. Being aware of time, because I want to leave a lot of time for the breakout rooms. I may not read the entire quote, but Don will be posting a PDF later, and I will end with some questions for the breakout rooms. And why am I not? Okay, good, I got it. Chapter 47, Duke, Mary, Dolly, and Popplecourt visit at the Cantrip's cousin's estate. Isabel dismisses clumsy suitor Dolly. I just love that Dolly keeps popping in and out of these novels. Look here, Mr. Longstaff, it's my opinion that a young woman not to be pestered. Pestered? You forced me to speak in that way. I've given you an answer ever so many times. I will not be forced to do it over and over again. Mary stonewalls yet another hapless suitor, Popplecourt, and the Duke really admires um, the Bonkesons. They seem to be sensible people. I don't know when I have met a man with higher ideas on politics than Mr. Bonkinson. His daughter is popular with everybody, a nice ladylike girl, and appears to have been well educated. Isabel then reveals Silverbridge's marriage proposal to Mary, who is astonished and confesses her love. And I will do as I have said, continued Miss Boncassen. I will do as I have said, though I love your brother down to the ground, she tells Mary. He shall not marry me without his father's consent. So obviously that has been the drama throughout the novel. Now, still at customs, they're breaking up. Mary refuses Lady Cantrip's request to meet with suitor Popplecourt. Oh, I really like Mary. Lord Popplecourt, he cares for nothing but his coal mines. If you bid me, I will, but if I can, it can do no good. I despise him, and if he troubles me, I shall hate him. As for marrying him, I will sooner die this minute. And Lady Cantrip was one of the most sensible, I think, characters in the novel. Did not insist on the interview. Now, Isabel reiterates to Mary she does not wish to disgrace Silverbridge. Under certain circumstances, I would not marry him. I will not have him be disgraced. Mary's dilemma, she feels very frustrated. She could not show that her dilemma with Tregear, that her father does not accept him. But as as we know, things will this once again, this will continue to be tension in the novel. And as I said, please forgive me for not reading all the quotes. You can check them out later. I just wanted to give a flavor because I don't want to cut too far into the breakout sessions, which is so delightful. The Duke and Isabel discuss rank. This I found fascinating. Many people think that if father would only allow himself to be put in nomination, he might be the next president, says Isabel. And the Duke replies, the choice, I'm sure, would do your country honor. And yet his father was a poor laborer who earned his bread among the shipping in New York. That kind of thing would be impossible here. My dear young lady, there you wrong us. There is no greater mistake than to suppose the inferiority of birth is a barrier to success in this country. Interesting contradictions in this chapter really come to light about the Duke. She listened to this and to much more on the same subject with attentive ears, not shaken in her ideas as to the English aristocracy in general, but thinking that she was perhaps learning something of his own individual opinions. If he were more liberal than others, on that liberality might perhaps be based her own happiness and fortune. We shall see. That the Duke should have one set of opinions so contrary to another set, poor Isabel did not understand. This I found really fascinating as I dug into it. He in all this was quite unconscious of the working of her mind. Not in discussing such matters generally did he ever mingle his own private feelings, his own pride of race and name, his own ideas of what was due to his ancient rank rather, with the political creed by which his conduct in public life was governed. The peer who sat next to him in the House of Lords, whose grandmother had been a washerwoman, and whose father an innkeeper, was to him every whit as good a peer as himself. But, but, there was an inner feeling in his bosom as to his own family, his own name, his own children, and his own personal self, which was kept together apart from his grand political theories. Aha, Major Tifto. Well, we know what happened to him. And therefore, and as much as he would have liked, the affair of Prime Minister in the Nail was um sorry, am I missing a page? I'm on the wrong page. The affair of Prime Minister in the Nail was not allowed to fade into obscurity. Um, Through September and October, it was made a matter for pungent inquiry. God, I love Trollope. The Jockey Club was alive. Sporting men declared that the honor of the turf required that every detail of the case should be laid open. But by the end of October, though every detail had been surmised, nothing had in truth been discovered. Nobody doubted but that Tifto had driven the nail into the horse's foot, and that Green and Gilbert Villiers had shared the bulk of the plunder. They had all gone off on their travels together, and the fact that each of them had been possession of about £20,000 was proved. Then, in the first week of November, a special meeting was called at the beer garden, at which the Lord Silverbridge was asked to attend. It is impossible he should be allowed to remain in the club. That was said to Lord Silverbridge by Mr. Lufton. Either he must go or the club must be broken up. Silverbridge was not happy. He had at last reasoned into believing that the horse had been made the victim of foul play, but he persisted in saying that there had been no conclusive evidence against Tifto. Then the meeting was held, and Tifto himself appeared. When the accusation was made by Mr. Lupton, who proposed that he should be expelled, he burst into tears. He's sort of a softy. I mean, he's not, well, maybe you could say he's not afraid to cry. I've got to say that I'm here, said Tifto, still crying. And if I've done anything of the kind, of course I'd have gone with the rest of them. I put it to Lord Silverbridge to say whether I'm that sort of fellow. Then he sat down. Upon this there was a pause, and the club was manifestly of opinion that Lord Silverbridge ought to say something. Silverbridge said, I think that Major Tifto should have not betted against the horse, and then Tifto explained. Chapter 50. Lady Cantrip tells the Duke that the Mary and Popplecourt match is no go and he should relent. Once again, somebody I really respect her. She ought to do as she's told, said the Duke, remembering how obedient his Glencora had been. She will do nothing without your permission, but she will remain unmarried unless she's allowed to marry Mr. Tregear. What do you advise then? Then you should yield. As regards money, you should give them what they want. Let him go into public life. You can manage that for him. He is conservative. What does that matter when the question is one of your daughter's happiness? Everybody tells me that he's clever and well conducted. Once again, the Duke continues to be not, I was going to say stubborn, he continues not to relent. Then Frank sends him a letter. He read the letter very carefully and at first was simply astonished by what he considered to be the unparalleled arrogance of the young man. In regard to rank, the young gentleman thought himself to be as good as anybody else. Um, but that was, I'm sorry, I'm sort of reading between two glasses. Um, is a, he thought the letter arrogant, but the Duke said, the Duke, as he read the letter, sort of was starting to gain respect for Frank. So, chapter 51, the Duke's guess, he replies very curtly, the Duke of Omnium presents his compliments to Mr. Francis Tregear and begs to acknowledge the receipt of Mr. Tregear's letter of blah, blah, blah date. The Duke has no other communication to make to Mr. Tregear and must beg to decline any further correspondence. Once again, and I'm going to change glasses, bear with me a second. So once again, mixed feelings here. It was not by his own doing that he, the Duke, belonged to any aristocracy, which if all exclusiveness were banished from it must cease to exist. But being what he was, having been born to such privileges and such limitations, was he not bound in duty to maintain a certain exclusiveness? He's wavering a little bit, but he certainly hasn't, as I said, he's not relented. Now, Lady Mary, at the Duke's request, sends invitation to visit with them at Matching at Christmas time to the Finns, the Boncassens, Mabel Grex, Miss Cass, and Silverbridge, all accept. That Lady Mabel should also be at Matching would certainly be a misfortune to Silverbridge, who had been waiting 3 months at the request of of Isabel, and he still hadn't gotten up the nerve or hadn't found the right time to speak to his father. Chapter 52, Miss Boncassen tells the truth. I will, jumping to the end here. You told me nothing, Silverbridge says, but that I was to come again in 3 months. Isabel replies, I said more than that. I bade you ask your father. Now you have come again. You cannot understand a girl's fears and doubts. How should you? I thought perhaps you would not come. When I saw you whispering to that highly born, well-bred beauty, and remembered what I was myself, I thought that you would not come. Silverbridge replies to her, then you must love me. Love you, my darling. No, 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 no. She retreated from him and just taken away. You ask if I love you. You are entitled to know the truth. From the sole of your foot to the crown of your head, I love you, as I think a man would wish to be loved by the girl he loves. He asked me, I speak to your father? Well, for what good? I've not spoken to father and mother, because I have known that it must depend upon your father, Lord Silverbridge. If he will tell me that I shall be his daughter, I will become your wife. But with such perfect joy, with such perfect truth. If it can, I'm just, what I also love here is contrasting her eloquence versus his lack of it. He's still a young guy. If it can never be so, if it can, if excuse me, if it can never be so, then let us be torn apart with whatever struggle still at once. It's clear to Mabel and Isabel they're rivals, but the Duke, who is remarkably clueless throughout the novel, he never suspected the real state of his son's mind. Um, Boncassen replies when Silverbridge says he wants to marry his daughter. He says, would it be no disgrace that she should be known here in England to be your wife, and that none of those of your rank, of what would then be her own rank, should welcome her into her new world? That would be out of the question. And Boncassen continued, well, if your own father refused to welcome her, would not others follow suit? You don't know my father. Well, you seem to know him well enough to fear that he would object. Yes, that is true. More do I want to know? If she were once my wife, he would not reject her. Of all human beings, he is in truth the kindest and most affectionate. Which I sort of find strange having Lord Silverbridge say that, but I guess they really are fond of their father. And therefore you would try him after this fashion. No, my lord, I cannot see my way through these difficulties. You can say what you want to please him as to your own wishes, but you must not tell him that you have any sanction from me. Okay. Silverbridge intended to persevere, trusting much to a belief that once he was married, his father would, quote unquote, come around. His father always did come around. But the more he thought of it, the more impossible it seemed to him that he should ask his father's consent at the present moment. Lady Mabel's presence in the house was an insuperable obstacle. Um, she then he talks to, excuse me, then talks to Isabel, and basically says he wishes you to marry that lady Mabel Grex, and you will marry her. Never. I might have done so had I not seen you. I should have done so if she had been willing. But now I never can, never, never. Her hand had dropped from his arm, but now she put it up again for a moment so that he might feel the pressure of her fingers. Say that you believe me. I think I do. You know I love you. Very tender moment. Mabel anguishes about not accepting Silverbridge's marriage proposal before Isabel appeared. I personally, I happen to think she was very foolish to have spurned him. That's me talking as a tangent. Lady Mabel had not been long at Matching before she learned that she had much in her favor. She perceived that the Duke himself had no suspicion of what was going on, and he was strongly disposed in her favor. She unraveled it all in her mind. There must have been some agreement between the father and son when the son had all but made his offer to her. And then she's talking to Miss Cass about the snake uh, leaving, and Miss Cass says, I don't think she's a snake. Don't be moral, Cass. She's a snake in my sense. She's got her weapons, and of course it is natural enough that she use them. If I want to be Duchess of Omnium, why shouldn't she? Okay, plot change. Silverbridge announces he's got to go to Polpenno to support Frank Tregier's bid to become the MP for the borough as the seat unexpectedly becomes available. And I just think this is a delightful, delightful bit, and it clearly talks about, as we've seen before, Trollope's disdain about politicking, or at least, shall I say, the canvassing and running for parliament. Excuse me for 1 second. Well, there they were in the Paul Wenning Assembly Room of Conservative Party. There was a clamor for the young lord. He was the son of an ex-prime minister, and therefore, of course, he could speak. He was himself a member of parliament, and therefore could speak. He had boldly severed himself from the faulty political tenets of his family, and therefore, on such an occasion as this, was peculiarly entitled to speak. The plea was so absurd that he was thrust onto his feet before he knew what it was about. And, well, as we see, he wasn't very well prepared. When you come back to this later, this and the next couple of slides are just delightful. You all know about it just as well as I do, continued Silverbridge, and I'm sure you feel that he ought to be a member for Polpenno. There could be no doubt about that. There can't be a better fellow than Frank Tregear, and I ask you to give 3 cheers for the new member. He keeps saying this. 10 times 3 cheers, and the Carbottle lights outside the door, who had come to report what was going on at the meeting, were quite of opinion that the eldest son of the former prime minister was a tower of strength. I don't know anything about Mr. Carbottle, continued Silverbridge, who was almost growing to like the sound of his own voice. Perhaps he's a good fellow, too. No, 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 no. A very bad fellow, indeed, was heard from different parts of the room. I don't know anything about him. I wasn't at school with Carbottle, and this was taken as a stroke of the keenest wit, and was received with infinite cheering. Silverbridge was in the pride of his youth, and Carbottle was 60 at the least. Nothing could be funnier. He seems to be a stout old party, but I don't think he's the man for Polpenno. I think you'll return Frank Tregear. I was in school with him, and I tell you, you can't find a better fellow than Frank. All right, Trollope on the joys of canvassing for votes in the rain. What a process. Parliamentary canvassing is not a pleasant occupation. It's perhaps nothing more disagreeable, more squalid, more revolting to the senses, more opposed to personal dignity can be perceived. You got to repeat the same words. The same words have to be repeated over and over again in the cottages, hovels, and lodgings of poor men and women who only understand that the time has come around in which they are to be flattered instead of being the flatterers, and also be paid off. So the same thing, he's being driven on. He's being driven on by his manager, and they were just having a miserable time. Picking up a quote here, you go through this to become a member of parliament. To go through it and then not become a member is base indeed. To go through it and to feel that you are probably paying at the rate of £100 a day for the privilege is most disheartening. Silverbridge, as he backed up Tregear in the uncomfortable work, congratulated himself on the comfort of having a Mr. Spurgeon rather, and a Mr. Sprout who could manage his borough for them. And they just did this miserably, miserably. There were 9 days of this work, during which Lord Silverbridge became very popular and made many speeches. Tregear did not win half as so many hearts or recommend himself so thoroughly to the political predilections of the borough, but nevertheless, he was returned. It would probably be just to attribute the success chiefly to the young lord's eloquence. It's really true to basically money, 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 money. And as you come back, as you remember when you read this, you'll be able to see this. The news is sent to Matching. Frank writes to Lady Mabel, tell Mary that my pride in being a member of parliament is much more on her behalf than on my own. The man who dares to love her ought at any rate to be something in the world. If ever it may be, I should wish to be something for her sake. I'm sure you will be glad of my success yourself for my own sake. Now, Lady Mabel thinks she's got something that will help Frank. The Duke took the letter in his hand and did read it very slowly. What he says about young men without means going into parliament is true enough, said the Duke. This was not encouraging, but as the Duke went on reading, Mabel did not think it necessary to argue the matter. She's not stupid. He had to read the last paragraph twice before he understood it. He did read it twice, and then folding the letter very slowly, gave it back to his companion. What ought I do? Asked Lady Mabel. As you and I, my dear, are friends, I think that any carrying of a message to Mary would be breaking confidence. I think that you should not speak to Mary about Mr. Tregear. Then he changed the subject. Lady Mabel, of course, understood that after that, she could not say a word to Mary about the election at Polpenno. Final chapter, the meeting at the Bobtail Fox. Okay. It was decided that a general meeting of the members of the Runnymede Hunt should be called together with the express object of getting rid of the major. The major was invited too. Quote, you are a swindler, a cheat, a rascal of the very deepest dye, a rogue so mean that it is revolting to be in the same room with you. That was what Mr. Jawstock had to say. You have evidence of what the Jockey Club thinks. The master of our hunt has been banished from racecourses. At any rate, he's been thoroughly disgraced, continued Mr. Jawstock. As a sporting man, he's been driven out of the Bear Garden Club. He resigned in disgust at their treatment, said a friend of the major's. And let him resign in disgust at ours, but we won't have him here. Well, the major then said, this is a very disagreeable position, very disagreeable indeed. He then said about Lord Silverbridge, I suppose he dropped well on 80,000 pounds. I propose to leave it to him. Let him say he ought to know more about it than anyone. He and I were partners at the horse, in the horse. If his lordship aren't very sweet upon me just at present, nobody need fear that he'll do me a good turn. I say leave it to him. In this matter, the major had been certainly well advised. A rumor had been prevalent among sporting circles that Silverbridge had refused to condemn the major. So, put it to the vote, Mr. Jawstock. Mr. Topps, said the livery stable keeper, Mr. Topps, who had great experience in public meetings, hereupon expressed an opinion that they might as well go to a vote. No doubt he was right if the matter was one which must sooner or later be decided in that manner. Then came a show of hands, first for those who desired to refer the matter to Lord Silverbridge, and afterwards for Tifto's direct enemies, for those who were anxious to banish Tifto out of hand, without reference to anyone. At last the matter was settled to the great annoyance of Mr. Jawstock and the farmers. The meeting voted that Lord Silverbridge should be invited as to the innocence or guilt of his late partner. They're trying to stay on time, so we have time for coming up next. Here's some questions. Did Major Tifto get the punishment he deserved, or was he treated unfairly? These characters, do they have integrity, defined as the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles that one refuses to change, or are they obstinate, stubbornly refusing to change one's opinion or chosen course of action, or both? What do you think, and why do you think so? Isabel, Lady Mabel, Lady Mary, Mr. Buncasson, Frank, the Duke, Lady Cantrip, and Silverbridge. I know I go stuff quickly. Hope it gave you a gist of what was covered in these very rich chapters. I had fun doing this, and hope this was helpful for you. And I'm gonna stop sharing. Okay, Dominic.